What's good with the YouTube? You already know Big Flacco from a convict's perspective, and I'm gonna smash, dash, slide on through with that little bit of energy, man. So check it out, man. Please hit the like, subscribe, comment, and do all the good stuff to help support this channel, man. So check it out. Before we go any further, man, we're gonna have a cash raffle again this Monday after the game. $3 entry, 10 entries. We had a good time. Everybody had fun, so we're gonna do the same thing this Monday, and we're gonna do it every Monday. If it's successful, we'll do it every Monday. And I'm hoping to give other prizes. Besides 3 cash prizes, I hope to give an additional, maybe some additional prizes as well. So tap in, man. Get your entries. So I'm gonna do this profile. I'm gonna be doing on is a former MA member named Jacko Padilla, Jacko. Okay, I did some time with him for about maybe like 2 years. Okay, my vecino, excuse me, was his secretary. We were in 4 before left. He passed away. Everybody knows that there was a big issue in this case, and we're going to get to all that later on. Okay, we're going to talk about the early details. This is the first part of his profile, which is going to be more along the lines of his story. Okay, I'm going to do my best to convey as much as I can, much details about what I've learned and what I've been being told. But at the same time, I'm going to try to keep those that are currently still in active standings out of any discussions. Anything that's publications that was already in the media or in court transcripts, I'll have no problem talking about freely. But anything that's not, I'm not going to discuss. Okay, and anybody that's not active no more, I have no problem discussing. So Jacko Padilla, Jaquez, was born in Covina, California in 1964, but was immediately moved to Azusa. Okay, he was basically given up to his aunt and uncle by his mom. His mom had her own personal struggles with addiction and other issues that she couldn't be present as a mom. So he was given to his aunt and uncle. And this later on in life really affected him, as a young preteen, okay, which led him down that path into gangs and drugs and a ferociousness and viciousness that was ruthless, Like Boxer Enriquez said in his book, he was a known thug, okay? Now, this is what people don't realize is that in the heart of Azusa, right there in the barrio, in the hood, he was raised in a very religious, fanatic family, okay? They were Jehovah's Witnesses, okay, which did not sit too well with him. And I think the part of him being given up by his mom affected him a lot more than people realize, So his upbringing was a little bit different. So while kids are having birthday parties and celebrating holidays, he's at home like any other day, probably picking up the Bible, And he always felt alone. He really never felt like that was his family, even though he appreciated them. But he just did not sit well that his mom left him. Okay. So by the age of like 11, 12, 13, he was already doing robberies. That was his thing. We're going to get into the details of some of those robberies. Okay. And one of the things that was really unique about him was that at 13, he was doing these robberies, man. And he just started to thrive on it. And as he got older, he went through juvenile hall, he went to YA, he went to prison by the time he was 18 years old. He was always known out there to have a shotgun on him. Always had a shotgun. Everywhere he went. He slept with a gun on him. Okay? This is the things that he used to do. He was never respected till he got made. He was feared out there because he had a very ferocious demeanor about robbing people. Okay? His biggest way of coming up was parties, where they had a cover charge and whatnot. So he would wait to get the information. As soon as he found out, he'd go stick them up. That was his thing. There came a part in his life where later on, okay, now this is what people don't realize. Now, he used to date a chick in La Puente, right? Who was associated with an individual who was related to a person named Grumpy. Grumpy is the one that introduced him to Boxer. Grumpy and Jacko were two of basically Boxer's kind of proteges out there in the streets. So that's where his relationship came with Boxer because of Grumpy. Otherwise, he would have never became an metal probably. And there's going to be reasons why they potentially may have recruited him. Now, like I said, they were doing all kinds of things. They were running like terrorists out there in the streets, man. There's a saying that as soon as he got locked up, the whole crime rate in Azusa went down. Now, he got in the hood like at a young age, around 13, 14. Okay, this is before it was called a Barrio Azusa 13, right? So in the 80s, he started working with Boxer. Okay, and they used to be so finesseful in some of the things that they used to do that Jacko, they'd have to do certain drives back then that would take 3 hours long in traffic during commute hours. So what Jacko started doing was there's a couple things he started doing. One, he would sit there and bring a mannequin, dress him up. So if ever there was a crime being committed, he could sit there and say, "Oh, nah, there's no way I could have drove from there to there at that time." You know what I mean? I was over here, and he'd make sure he was seen if he went and did a lick. Okay. Now the other thing he would also do, if he didn't have a mannequin, he'd go fucking find a homeless person and fucking kidnap him, and basically put him in the car and make him drive back with him. And then when he gets to the Susa, leave the guy in the car and take off. So he was, so he was off the hook out there, man. And that's why when Boxer says he was a thug, it's not that he was a thug. He was about his shit, you know. And I think it was once he became an metal, was trying to change things. Now he was involved in a couple of the hits out there. One of the murders cases that happened, but it was alleged that he gave a gun that was used in a homicide that was used in one of Boxer Enriquez's case. So around that time, he ends up doing a bank robbery, I believe it was. And in the process of the bank robbery, he ends up kidnapping and holding someone hostage, an older lady, going on a high-speed chase, takes the cops on a wild one, crashes, and then the lady goes through the windshield. And that's how he ended up catching his life sentence. Now, Boxer pushed for him to be recruited into the MA. I don't know how hard he pushed, but Chuco Castro ended up becoming his sponsor. And I think he was pulled around 89. Now, there was a time frame before he got pulled where when he was out there, he was, I think he got out maybe in 88. And around that time, he was in San Jose for a little bit, believe it or not, for about 6 months. And, he was starting to try to do the same thing out there in San Jose. So he was told he had to leave and went all the way back. You know what I'm saying? So he was always in Baldwin Park, La Puente, Susa. These are all his stomping grounds, and later became territorial. Now, that's how he met Grumpy, was through a female that was somehow related and connected to him. And so, he was recruited around 1989. And one of the reasons why, according to him, one of the purposes of why they recruited him was he was a potential, he was supposed to be the potential hitman maybe in the future with Boxer Enriquez. I guess there was some potential issues at that time that were kind of on the back burner, and that they felt if ever they needed to use him, they would use him to take him out. You know what I'm saying? That's one of the reasons why. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's according to Jacko. Even though Boxer's the one that pushed for it, the reason why they approved it. You know what I'm saying? Because he was, getting his money out, but he was a, kind of a hardcore gangster out there. And so they felt like if they ever needed to use him to get at Boxer, hey, they got one right here. They're going to use him. You know what I'm saying? And that was around 89. I think Boxer flipped like years later, but that was something that they potentially had in mind at the time. And I don't know if that's known or if that's been put out there, but that's what I've been told through according to Jacko. You know what I'm saying? Even though Boxer's one of the ones that had a lot to do with him being recruited. Crazy, huh? Backdoor politics. So I'm not going to go into as much more stuff as far as this topic because I'd rather keep this kind of simple. We're going to go through this in different stages. We're going to talk about, his debriefing process, about the book he was writing, about how he was transferred out of state, about why he flipped, and some of the things that he was involved in. You know what I'm saying? He was okay with where he was at in his life when he was locked up. It was what it was. You know what I'm saying? He'd been out there doing his thing for a minute, and we're going to get into why, maybe in the second or third episode. I'm not sure how we're going to outline this, but this is going to go through in stages. And so, backtracking on those early years, he was just a very violent kid. You know what I'm saying? His thing was robberies, like any type of robberies, but the party ones were the main ones he used to do. Because back then they had different type of rave like parties, and they'd have get-togethers. They'd have money, so he'd go stick them up. Bank robberies, liquor stores, pressing up on drug dealers. That was his thing, and a lot of it stemmed that he felt later on in life was because of, how alone he felt and how everything affected him being left to be raised in a Jehovah's Witness family by his own mother. So, which is kind of true of every kid. And this is kind of a message to any kid out there. You got to realize that sometimes the impact that us have as parents towards our kids, we don't realize how it affects them until later, man. That's why it's always important that you're there, supportive, doing all that you can to guide them in the right direction, nurture them, and be role models. Because when you don't have role models, And the ones that you do have, you're resistant to, you're going to go to the ones that you feel comfortable with, which is what gravitated him towards that gang lifestyle, you know? And so we're going to be touching about, you know, his advancement within the MA and some of the issues that happened and whatnot, the case with his wife. You know, it's a very interesting story. I mean, you know, that, you know, after hearing a little bit more details about Jacko, it all makes sense because it's the same story that we hear all the time. You know, our upbringing, the influences around us have a lot to do with where we take our life. And a lot of times we're not given that choice because we already think that decision is already made for us. You know, sometimes we think it's our destiny to be this gangster, to be involved in these mob activities. And, you know, the respect in the hood goes to the one who ends up becoming the big homie, which he ran his program as a big homie for a long time, had a lot of influence, you know. Anyways, this is part one. I hope you guys enjoyed it, man. I'm going to have a lot more and some pictures as well of them. And just remember this. This is his truth as best told through another party to me. Okay, before he passed away. You know what I'm saying? That's all I have to say about it, man. This is not anything I personally know. I could talk about the things I seen from him, you know, because I know there was a lot of activity in Corcoran's shoe, and I'll get to that when we get later on into this profile. But we want to do this in little segments so you guys get a better, real understanding of why people go down that life and who Jacko really was. Whether he was someone good or bad, that's up to you to decide. But this is his truth. This is his story. You know what I'm saying? As told by those that know him well. With that said, your boy Flacco, Convict's Perspective, I'm gone. So we already discussed part of the you know, transition from him becoming a, you know, street thug out in the streets that was people feared, to someone who started to associate with the MA out there in the streets, to catching his case, to finally getting pulled by Chico Castro. We further talked about, you know, his family upbringing, how his mom wasn't there. He was raised in a Jehovah's Witness family, and all kinds of unique factors that we think played a key factor into his future and what led him to the path he took. Now, fast forward, he's now locked up, and eventually he ends up in the Bay. And as we know, a lot of MA members are given a particular territory, prison, and whatnot for them to, you know, hold control over and to run their operations, as well as if they're associated with any female that they're married to, they're usually given that area as a territory as well, out of respect. Now, he was given, I believe, five areas he had total control. 2 areas he had partial control. He had Azusa, La Puente, right? Baldwin Park, Covina, and El Monte. He had all 5 of these areas. Then he had part of Glendora and part of Monrovia. Now, they did numerous stuff from, he had witnesses hit out in the streets, gave directives for people to get hit, taxation and whatnot, ran drug operations, all the while he was in Pelican Bay and then in Corcoran's shoe. Now, he got hemmed up and took into Corcoran's shoe sometime, I want to say maybe around 2000, in the early 2000s. They just came and got him one night, took him down to Corcoran. So while he was there, there was a couple major issues that he was involved in. Okay, one involved an individual named Ralph Swifty Flores, who ended up catching the death penalty case. He was one of the key conspirators that was involved in what they call a cleansing of the streets at that time. As we know, there was numerous incidents that occurred in 1999. You know what I'm saying? Based upon that Pelican Bay riot and a lot of racial tensions out there in the streets. Amongst certain Sureño neighborhoods that were targeting certain African Americans out there in their neighborhoods. Azusa was one of those areas. And a lot of that, what people don't realize is this. Now, this is all facts, what I'm about to tell you guys. Jacko did not like black people. He was extremely racist. Anybody that personally knows him knows exactly what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? And so at that time, like so many others were putting out orders, he was ordering the cleansing of the streets. Now, I don't know if something happened to him like in prison, on the streets, or he just had a personal distaste if he was raised that way. I don't know. But he was very racist towards African Americans. Okay. Now, there was 2 individuals that came out around 2002 that were the main ones that were coming out to take care of business for him on his behalf. That was Gabriel Daniel Aguilera and Robert Thumper Ramirez. They protested Azusa in early 2002, and allegedly they started to begin to conduct operations, right? And some of those orders were, you know what I'm saying, were under Jacko Padilla's authority was to cleanse the streets. So even though Jacko never got indicted for those numerous murders that happened with African Americans. But what also helped out there, what people don't realize is there was 3 fire bombings. There was a lot of people that were being killed, and it was really big in the news at that time. You know, I think by 2004, after Swifty got the death penalty, I think everything started to slow down a little bit. Like I said, there were at least 4 people I know that probably testified on behalf of this whole case. And even though they implemented Jacko Padilla, the DA never filed any charges. You know, I think maybe they were looking into bigger things. Okay, so that was, like I said, a big issue. Now, the main issue that happened later on, man, was the issue that happened when his wife was given basically the ambassador role out there in the streets to run operations for the MA. She had as much pull as if you thought you had an MA member out there in the streets, because he gave her that authority. He entrusted her, okay? Now, it's not uncommon for a wife, sister, or whatever to be given an associate role, secretary. This role she was being lived up to was like she was calling green lights. She was going to war with other MLOs out there in the streets on behalf of Jacko. Jacko was in Corcoran at that time, and this is around the time when I think I was with him, and I know there were some issues with my vecino at that time. Shotgun was his secretary. Now, around 2008, right? Like I said, his wife decided to go to war. Basically, these 2 MLOs who came out from the feds, right? They were, I think, Cisco Munoz Gonzalez, right? And the other one was Ralph Perico Rocha, right? 2 MLOs. And what they started to do was they came out to the streets and they were out there collecting taxes on behalf of Jacko, right? But he had no idea that these guys were doing it. These guys were loyalists to the feds, right? So here you have a state-federal faction where the feds, they have the federal commission. The state has a whole totally different type of functions. So this cut into his money, okay? So on authorization of Jacko, his wife at that time went to war with these other MLOs. There was hits that were ordered. You know what I mean? It was a crazy situation. I've never ever heard of a woman being given that much authority on the streets to conduct operations on behalf of an MLO. Now, this is going on the whole time, like right after I had just left him. You know what I'm saying? And so, what was his wife's name? It was Dolores Lola Yantada, I think. I think that's her last name. Right? She went to war with his carnales, and she was basically a liaison for the MA members out in the streets. And she had the ability to call shots. And some people out there compared to her like she was like the queen of the area. You know what I'm saying? Like she was basically running operations, and she ended up getting indicted as well as other MA associates. So can you imagine that? Out there in the Calles, you got 2 active MA members who are, I think they were newly recruited. Jacko's in Corcoran, but he has his wife out there, right? She's taking care of operations with other MA associates, and they're going to war with 2 MLOs. That had to be one of the biggest conflicts I've ever heard of. Because think about it. You got individuals who are straight loyal to Jacko, but there's nobody out there that's an MA member. Yet you have 2 other MA members out there that are trying to fucking infringe on his territory. You know what I mean? Imagine being a street soldier at that time, how much of a bad situation you're being put in. Because here you got 2 carnales telling you that, hey, nah, you're going to follow under our fucking jurisdiction. Yet you got the wife out there saying, nah, you rocking with us. So it was a big, big issue that was like, it was going on for a little bit, man. And I've never heard of anything of that fashion ever occurring ever before, but I'm pretty sure it has. I know within the NF, it's never happened. You've had certain females who thought that they were authoritative or they did a lot of time, and now they think that they have a special place and they're just being utilized for what they are. You know what I mean? Of course, they're respected. There's love for them, but at the end of the day, they can't be a carnal. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, it just becomes a very delicate scenario. And this right here was one where she just basically had the status and rank of an MA member. As I said, man, this led to, this is one of the reasons why Jacko ended up dropping out. There's going to be a little bit more details about that in the upcoming, I think maybe final episode is going to be a lot longer. We're going to talk about who he debriefed to, some of the past allegations of what he went through, where he went to when he left California, how he got out, and so forth. And it's going to have a lot of intricate details that you never before heard. I find it kind of interesting that he always said that one day he would get out, regardless if he was 99 years old. He was going to see the streets at least one more time, and he was able to see it. We're going to go into how he passed away as well. But these are the two issues that you could, when you sit there and think about Jacko, these are some of the main issues. Now, there's another one. He had sponsored an individual named Walter Cortez, Shotgun, from 18th Street, my vecino. And as well as there's belief that Shotgun may have gave a green light out in the streets under Jacko's authority that he wasn't supposed to put out there. Shotgun ended up going to Folsom. Instead of standing down, he stayed behind who his padrino was. And I think that led to, I don't know what his standings are, but I know he ended up getting hit in Folsom, New Folsom, when they hit the main line. Shotgun was a good dude, though. I liked him. You know, him and his vecino. But you could tell he was really striving. You know what I'm saying? He was really heavily under Jacko's influence. And I think when he got pulled, I think that's when Jacko started to lose a lot of the, you know what I'm saying, authority and pull that he had, you know, in the system. I don't know if they were hating on him or what it was, because, you know, to be running that many areas, you're going to have a lot of other inmetals who are not making as much money as maybe Jacko's making. There's going to be a lot of hate. It's happened throughout history. You know, it happened with 18th Street when they had the one individual that was running 18th Street for a while, or maybe that was MS-13. I think it was MS-13 or 18th Street. Whatever it was, people get jealous. No, it was 18th Street. They get jealous, they start to hate, and they wonder why one particular individual is making all the money. Everybody feels like they get to get a piece of the pie. Now, my experience with Jacko, he was cool. You know what I'm saying? He was very quiet. The other MA member that was there was an OG MA member named Nego, Robert, I think, Caval, from Colton. Long-time MMA member. He had a killing on him and Mundo, I think, killed an NF member in Soledad at one time. He was pretty cool, man. He was in his 60s busting down burpees, literally. But he would sleep all fucking day, and then he'd come up out of nowhere at 3 o'clock. Hey, Walter! You know, that's how he talked. Fucking hella funny old man. He was cool, though. But Jacko was running everything. He was running everything in that block. Artie was in the other block. Weddle and all them were over there, too, as well. But for 4 left, pretty much that was all Jacko. He didn't have anybody to intervene, step on his toes. So he was just running a lot of his operations out in the streets. And if you were good with him, he entrusted you. You know, not every individual is like that. He was very reserved. And what I mean by that was he was quiet. Quiet in a respectful fashion. Like, he'd come by, if you seen him, he'd be like, what's up? He would just be paying attention. And that's the one thing I noticed about him as opposed to other medals I met, you know, that I've met a lot of MA members. I haven't spoken on all of them. Not every one of them held themselves up to a high standard up to here. You know what I'm saying? Jacko carried himself very well, very quiet. He stayed working out, doing a routine. Every time he came out, he made sure all the camaradas were busting down with him. He would run the routine with them, and he'd pay attention. And everybody respected him. You know, and that's common, though. Every time there was ever an medal there, you know, and the Southsider got close to him, they'd be happy. They'd be like, hey, Jack. I used to trip off it because Jack, well, he was just cool. I didn't have no issues, man. But this is the extent of what I experienced and what I seen from him. You know what I'm saying? There was numerous times where we'd be across from each other in the cage. We would chop it up. You know what I'm saying? We just talk about life, sports, you know what I'm saying, gambling, you know what I'm saying? Just different things of that nature. And that's just how it is in the shoe. Anybody been there, it's real respectful. You know what I'm saying? It's like a neighborhood. You know you're going to be there for years. Like, it's like moving into a neighborhood. Do you want to have problems with all your neighbors? You know what I'm saying? Or would you rather just be respectful? You know what I'm saying? Hey, I got a paquete. Hey, here. Hey, you going to revistas? Hey, send them. That's the kind of stuff that you'd experience there. You know, and it's almost like, it's almost a trip because it's almost like they'll treat, like, say, like the other soldados that are northerners, like the MAs will treat them like nicer than sometimes their own people. And sometimes some of the carnales would treat some of the sureños better than they would the fucking homeboys. It's a trip. That's how Lencho was. You know, I didn't have that in my block, but, you know, in other blocks it'd be like that sometimes, man. You know, like I said, man, this is pretty much the extent of his career as far as, and this led to his demise. Basically, this was one of the issues why he decided to cooperate and leave that lifestyle. And those are the two main issues throughout his career that he was involved in. I'm pretty sure he was involved in a whole lot of other hits and so forth like that. But some things, the family member is not going to really disclose. But in the next chapter that we're going to do on this profile, we're going to get into a lot of details about his afterlife after leaving, when he stepped home, the things he talked about. The family member actually got to talk to him for days on days out there on the streets and was able to obtain so much of what really was going on. So, like I said, my disclaimer with that is this is his interpretation of what Jack told him. And I'm going to leave that there. With that said, it's your boy Flacco, Convict's Perspective. I'm gone. Before we go further,
before we get to this video, man, we're going to have the family get a little collage, man, a family member. So you may hear a little bit of silence. There was some music to it, but he was out there around 88, music, so
on the east side,
it's a little 2.5 minutes of some pictures of Jacko's life. And then at the end of this video, you're going to see additional pictures.
Yeah, family member.
Hope you guys enjoyed this premiere.
So he was staying with a family member, and they said that he had these eyes at times when he was like Robert Duran, when he had that focus point, when he was like, he was up to no good. And so one day he seen him, and his family member told him, I don't want you getting into any trouble. If you do, you got to leave. So he decided to go for a stroll down the Story King, and he seen a carload come by about a couple of times with 4 chicks in it, right? And so he realized that, he picked it out. They knew he wasn't from the town, so they knew that they were scouting him for potential prey, right? So he goes over to the old Taco Bell. So the females come by and they try to pick up on him. They go, "Hey, you want to come party with us?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm down. I'm with it." And so when the females told him, "Hey, we'll get into the front seat," and he's like, "Nah, I'm gonna get in the back seat." So he ends up telling the person that was behind the passenger, "Hey, scoot over. I'm getting in." Now the driver said, "Hey, I'd rather have you up front up here." He goes, "Nah, I'm fine where I'm at." This is where they continued to drive. So they pretty much were already at that point, kind of the females. He turned it all on them because they want him up front, because in the back they had weapons. So they start getting at him like, "Hey, we want to pull over, get some alcohol out the trunk." And they start trying to run that drag, right? Let's go up to the hills, up to, I think it was up towards Mount Hamilton, I believe, man. And this is where the story starts to change with these incidents with these females. Right? He decides to get active, right? He ends up fucking pretty much elbowing the fucking lady behind him, right next to him, right? There's in the middle seat. There's 4 chicks in the car. Pulls out a pistol and then pistol whips the passenger immediately, and then pretty much holds all of them up at gunpoint. And then from there, everybody's freaked out. The females are scared shitless. They said, well, what do we do? He said, "Just keep on driving." And they say, "Where to?" "Wherever you're going to take me." So he takes them up to the hills, and at that point, he makes the female strip down straight up. And then he pretty much gets their clothes and says, "Check this out. In 5 minutes, stay at the spot. I want you walk a quarter mile, you'll find your clothes." Right? And at this point, the female that's driving the car is looking at him like, wow, you know what I'm saying? Like, she's digging this dude. Like, this dude's with that action, right? So what happens from there is, he ends up leaving. He tells the females, if I come back here and you left before 5 minutes, I'm killing all you guys. So he ends up leaving with his passenger, the driver. And he tells her, she goes, "Where are we going to go? Well, where can we get some dope?" She goes, "I know a few spots." She ends up taking him to the Connect spot. He goes up to the door, knocks the door. The dude opens up, right? Some dude that's all fucking straggly. He fucking pistol whips that dude instantly. Bam! And just fucking, you know what I mean? Asks where this dude's at. He looks for it. The dude comes out. He's glaring guns. He starts pistol whipping him. He said, "I want all your dope and all your money." Pretty much stripped him down for everything. So then he went and had party with this female for about a day, And this is where his behavior started to escalate. It caused friction a little bit with the family, because there was another incident that happened to where he decided to go down to the Pink Elephant, ran into a person that was coming to see him. Next thing you know, he turns this dude out into fucking on drugs, running around fucking high, doing licks, doing robberies. And see, at that time, one of his family members was in the gang doing a little bit of business, right? He ends up robbing every fucking single connect that used to get fucking dope from his family member. So he was out there just going at it, man. Stripping cats down, pistol whipping dudes, and he was basically terrorizing San Jose for a minute. People don't realize that. And I think this was either before he became a Mexican Mafia member or around that time. You know what I'm saying? But he was already, on the verge of going that direction. I think this is 88, 89. Okay. Now, these are stories that happened before. Now, we're going to get to the aftermath of what happened to him once, all the issues happened in Corcoran. So, as we know, the issue that occurred was between him And, those other individuals that were under some federal MMA members were trying to use his name to infiltrate and take over certain jurisdiction. Now, around that time, he had jurisdiction and authority for a long time as an inmetal. And he was running a lot of different areas. And he kind of wanted to step on back a little bit, but still be in good standings and do what he had to do. But because of this, everything came out. And this is one of the main reasons why he decided to walk away, was because he didn't get the backing from those carnales at the time that he used to support, right? And there's also a lot of issues that came up because of the book that Boxer Enriquez dropped, right? That there were certain things that were said in that book, certain family members that were discussing certain things that happened that rubbed a few inmetals wrong, right? So he kind of lost a lot of support because a lot of the secrets and skeletons were coming out, that were buried deep because of Boxer's book. Now, I don't know. This is what I've been told directly that came out of his mouth. This is his story, his truth, guys. So bear with me on that. See, and one of the things that was told to him was that it's out of their hands, basically. You know what I'm saying? Like they couldn't do nothing for him to help support him or whatnot, that he had to deal with that issue on his own. And this is one where his wife and stuff got indicted, or, when she was out there running shit, when there was a war going on out there for territories. Also, he was starting to regret some of the decisions he made, that dudes that were catching time, that were, got killed or killed other people and whatnot, how it was affecting their families. And his family was out there. So they would run into people that, their family members were running into his family members that they were doing life or doing time because of Jacko. Jacko had that much authority out there in the streets, as we already know. So he started to reevaluate things about his life, man. And it kind of started to change him in a different direction. Like I said, there always has to be that act of betrayal for you to open your eyes to see a whole bigger picture. And that's exactly what he started to see. He started to have what you would call an awakening. He started to feel bad for Swifty and a couple other people that had caught cases and were doing time, and how it affected their families. Like, his conscience got to him a little bit, man. And he started to reevaluate things about his life, and that's where the transition started to change to where, he went in a whole different direction. Now, another thing that was going on as well is that he was getting sick. You know what I'm saying? And that's one of the things that he was realizing. He always said that he never wanted to die in prison. He always said that he would never die in prison. And that's something that people didn't realize, is about how sick he was getting. See, actually about 2.5 years, he wanted to step back before all the indictments happened. The stuff that happened with his lady, when they went to kind of had that little war going on. And, he wanted to, I think it pulled him back in a little bit. And so he already had some thoughts about how he wanted to change his directions, because we know that there's some people who they don't fall out of graces. They kind of stop being involved in the internal politics as much, and their presence, they're there. Like Nagel from Colton was like that, because he was an old timer, kind of did his time and whatnot. So, sometimes members are okay with that. You know what I'm saying? But there's more to the story that happened afterwards, right? Which led to him taking a whole different approach with everything. And see, that was one of the things that he had issues with, because when he wanted to step back a little bit from everything, all the other carnales told him that they needed him there in Corcoran, because there's a lot of shit that was going on. As we already know, Corcoran's always been a hotbed for fucking prison politics. And that's why he was upset when that issue happened 2.5 years later, with those guys trying to impede on his turf, right? They were trying to cause blockage from what he was doing and trying to fucking overtake it, that he didn't get the support. That was one of the main things that was upsetting them about everything. And the movie was called Angels with Dirty Faces. And, the ending was what he used to laugh about. It was one of his favorite movies because of the ending. He used to mock it. And he used to laugh at that, thinking the dude was weak when the dude would start crying and stuff. And this time it finally hit home, all the stuff that he'd done. And this is that was his favorite movie, but he used to mock it, make fun of it. And that's when he elected just to step on back. And he elected to debrief. When he debriefed, it was an interesting time period, because according to him, he only debriefs on stuff that was already known. He didn't go into any details about anything else that was going to incriminate anybody. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? This is what's been said on his behalf. And there's been a lot of people that have debriefed that have only talked about what they did. So, but at that time he had some lawyers. He was trying to get the compassionate release, and they were reaching out to him about all the warfare that was going on out there in the streets about between the Southsiders and a lot of the blacks. There was the racial tensions. And even though he wasn't active, he started to try to reach out to people and say, look, you don't want to end up like me in here. You know what I'm saying? I guided you guys down the wrong direction. And he tried to make an effort. Some of it worked. Maybe some of it didn't. You know what I'm saying? Everybody knows the game, how it goes. And eventually, the Governor Brown was kind of denying his compassionate release. And finally, it got pushed to where they put him up for compassionate release. So he had a little bit of impact, I guess, on trying to reach out to the streets to try to, circumvent all the warfare that was going on amongst, the racial tension. A lot of it was going on. A lot of it came from Big Homie's directives, or allegedly came from Big Homie's directives. So he had some type of impact. And at that time, they finally got the compassionate release. But part of the compassionate release was that he was to not be in California. He was sent to New Mexico, right? Had a parole agent out there. Ended up leaving New Mexico and ended up in Arizona. And next thing you know, he catches himself in a wreck. He's out there using drugs again. You got to remember, he's in pain. He's dying. And at this point in his life, right, he was, he met a chick out there. Like I said, they had a case to where New Mexico wanted him over here, California wanted him back, and Arizona wanted him. And somehow he got out from all these cases. He was in the county jail out there in Arizona for a minute. I don't know what county. But, he was, like I said, he was still out there, he knew he was on his borrowed time. He knew his time was coming. All the stuff that he was involved in was all coming to light, and he always said that, like I said, he was never going to die in prison. He was always going to die on the streets. There was times when he was in the hospital during this time period in comas. He almost died a couple of times, pronounced dead at one time. So he was really in bad shape, man. And so, it was difficult. He was free, but at the same time, he didn't feel free. You know what I'm saying? I think his demons were still haunting him. All the stuff he'd been through. I heard that part of his debriefing or part of some of his stuff that he discussed in writing the book. I guess Chris Blatchford was allegedly there or someone else. This is what I've been told. Okay, I'm not sure. I can't confirm it. But he did have a book that he was writing. I think it's called Jehovah to Life, because he was raised in a Jehovah Witness family that pushed him away. And now he was finally trying to live life, But there's a lot of stuff that was going on up until he passed away, which I'm going to be coming to pretty soon, man, because people know he's passed away, but they don't know the intricate details. Basically, California had relinquished any type of jurisdiction over him. They said, that's your problem. He was sick in there, so no, they ended up not filing any charges on him because they knew he was on short time at that time, and like I said, the addiction kept on continuing, man, but there was some question marks I'm going to get into in a second about that. Now, when he got out the final time out of jail, out of Arizona, they dropped him from the witness protection program. So he was no longer getting any type of assistance. He was pretty much left to fend for himself. You know what I'm saying? So here you go from someone who was, a high-powered Mexican Mafia member in California, you know what I'm saying, running things, fucking having people killed and everything, and to getting sick, to them assisting him, to him fucking burning all his bridges to where he had nothing. He had family a little bit, but at the same time, he was refraining from, being around family because of his sickness, how he was feeling and how he was dealing with it, man. Like a lot of people, when they're that sick, how they deal with their addiction? They fucking feed it. And that's exactly what Jacko was doing, was to get rid of the pain. He was feeding his addiction. Now he was still running around with that chick that he was first seeing, that they were doing drugs together. And this is how he was found dead, was he was found by a neighbor, dead, passed out somewhere with a syringe in his arm. And the chick that was with him was nowhere to be found. Now, the potency of what he took was 9 times powerful than it should have ever been, as far as, that's how much heroin was in there. Okay, so, the family came down, family was in contact with, this is what the family ended up telling them, because law enforcement ended up getting at him, at his family, saying that they suspected potential foul play, that there was too much heroin being put in his system for him to fucking have been able to inject that much by himself. He would have had a hard time getting half of it in without nodding out. So they felt like that he got a hot shot, that he was deliberately killed. You know what I mean? As heroin addicts, they know, unless you're going to fucking go like this and just fast, there's no way you're going to be able to get that much in you, because you're going to go slow, because you're not going to want to miss. You're going to want to make sure. And by a certain point, there's a certain point where you're not going to be able to hit anymore. You know what I'm saying? Now, there's no way that he could have had that much heroin in his system and injected it himself. and the person's nowhere to be seen. You know, he was old school though, but who knows how much pain he was in. And so anybody knows that's ever been around rigs and slamming dope, you never let anybody fix your fucking rig. You fix it yourself because you know what's up in there. You know, the water, everything. You go get all your own supplies. And you know what I mean? And I don't encourage anybody that does drugs out there like that. But what I'm saying is those are key facts in the dope game. If you're going to be a shooter, man, you got to take all precautions because there's some crazy shit going on. So the family told law enforcement authorities that, you know, they didn't want it to be investigated. That there was enough attention for all the stuff that he'd done all these years, and they just wanted to bring him home. You know what I'm saying? So he passed away, and that's how he died. You know, in Arizona. You know, he was in New Mexico, went from New Mexico to Arizona, and he got in some stuff out here. He wasn't living right, man. But you know, this is his story. You know, I've talked intensely with one of his family members. This is what he went through. You know, there's a lot of things that people don't know. There's a lot of things that he was upset about regarding Boxer's book. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I'm not here to judge anybody's book. You know, there's also another thing. He was sold up with Joe Morgan at one time. That's an interesting factor that I never knew. The fucking peg leg. You know, fucking dude from American Me, JD. That was his celly at one time. So he was around heavy hitters his whole life. You know, Boxer was one of the ones that had, I think it was Chuco sponsor him. You know what I'm saying? So he was definitely a figure in that lifestyle, man. But somewhere along the lines, he decided to walk a whole different way of life. And, you know, there's a lot of different things that you may have heard about this and that. According to what I heard, he didn't speak upon any organizational business that they didn't need to know about. He kept all that fucking just to himself. He didn't do anything that was going to bring any time to anybody. This is his story. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to respect that this is what was passed to a family member from him. Everything I'm talking about, this is coming directly from a family member that had discussions with him. You know, I knew Jacko. I did time with him. I did like 2 years with him, and he was cool. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't a very, what do you call, he wasn't an asshole. He wasn't a fucking, really looked like a tyrant. A lot of dudes respected him. You know what I'm saying? My vecino was his secretary at the time. So I chopped it up with him. You know, I seen him give my salutes and all that. You know, it's kind of surprising when everything happened, though, because Corcoran's always been a mess because Corcoran's able to have a lot more jurisdiction in the Bay back then because they had more resources to the county jails and to the streets and visits and so forth, man. So, you know, it always put him in a tough position because he had to politic right. And he did it. He politicked right for a long time because he was able to fucking wiggle and get by where other people had failed. You know what I'm saying? But this is his story, man. This is Jacko Padilla's story. This is his part. Like I said, man, you know, there's probably a lot more stuff that I've missed out on, but these are more the personal details, like what he was going through, the addiction issues, you know, he was sick, how he got out. Lawyers had to press it. Governor Brown did not want to let him out on compassionate release. They finally got it, I think, in 2016 where it was passed. I don't know the exact date of when he passed away. I think 2018 or 19. Maybe around then. But he was working on the book, and he had 230 pages out of it, and most of it was done. And it's called Jehovah to Life, I believe is what it was called. And I know that there's going to be some stuff worked out, you know what I'm saying, to kind of finish it up. But it's his story. It's not about fucking exposing everybody or anything. It's about his life, what he went through. In the long run, like so many other people, you could have so many years of service as far as being a member of one of these organizations, man. But when your time's up, your time's up. And when you're done, you're done. It's the truth. It happens all the time, man. And, you know, this is where his life's at now. You know what I'm saying? You know? Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed it. This is Jacko Padilla's story.